Well, good morning, Northview. How are you doing this morning? It is good to see you. Good to be back with you in 2023. Hey, if you have a Bible with you or a Bible app on your phone, turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. We're going to be in chapter 2 this morning. We're going to continue in our series called Searching for Something. Let me ask you a question while you guys are turning to Ecclesiastes. Have you ever had a search for something that was so all-encompassing, it kind of became your subtle or maybe not so subtle life's agenda? Because you were convinced that after finding said something that you were searching for, life would be complete. Maybe you're a little bit like me, and whenever you purchase something, specifically a larger purchase, you research it and you dive into, with great detail, understanding everything you can understand about how to discern what is the exact right, perfect one to get. Like maybe a car, for example, and you go into great detail, searching and researching and trying to make sure you get the exact right car because you're convinced, I got to do this right because it's going to bring me great joy or great dissatisfaction if I do it wrong. Some of you guys are a little bit like me, though. It's not just cars. I mean, it's everything. It's TVs, it's toasters, it's whatever. And you're research people, you're review people, and you almost go into paralyzation of analysis because you're making sure or trying to make sure you get the right one. Maybe it's not something like that. Maybe it's something like this. You're on a quest to figure out what restaurant has the best salsa in town. Or where the best store-bought salsa is. I don't know why it's salsa for me, but I'm always convinced that there's a better salsa than the one I keep pulling out of my fridge. And every time I go to the store, I think there's going to be one of these times the right salsa is going to be picked. And I'm never, ever going to have to keep trading brands anymore. It's just going to be, this is the salsa of choice, and this is our go-to. Maybe it's a favorite date night spot for you, or maybe it's a search for the perfect investment portfolio mix. Maybe it's a relationship that you're trying to find in your life. But often after these searches, especially when these searches have a conviction that if I could just find this, I'll be happy. What ends up happening is it's like that U2 song is playing in the back of your life story, and you still haven't found what you're looking for. I think if you've ever been there, if you've ever been honest enough to admit that you've searched and searched and searched, in a lot of ways, life has just kind of left you going, I don't get it, or I'm unsatisfied or unfulfilled, then you're ready for the book that is called Ecclesiastes. In the Old Testament, it's a wisdom literature book. It comes right after Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. It's written in a style that is designed to be kind of teacher to student, like, hey, let me share with you the things of life that you need to get, that you need to grab a hold of, that you need to understand, because if you don't understand them, life could be very, very painful or difficult for you. Danny kicked us off, Danny Schaffner, last week with a great message out of chapter 1 where he kind of said that, look, the best version of who we are is the version that God has created us to be. And until we figure that out, really life can be very, very painful. And the book of Ecclesiastes bookends with, I would say, its purpose statements. The end and the beginning are bookends. The middle is where all the wrestling is, and you kind of get this personal biography from the writer where he says, look, here's how I came to that conclusion. I had a lot of money, I had a lot of influence, I had a lot of ability and time on my hands to explore the different ways that life might be fulfilling. In the middle of Ecclesiastes is all about his wrestling. And I think the word wrestling is a great word because that's what this book does. It wrestles. It wrestles. I would say the book of Ecclesiastes is the fight of faith in poetry and prose form. It's the struggles, it's the difficulties, it's the challenges, it's the wrestling of life on earth, the urges, the desires that we have, how to make it all fit together, how to understand it, and the frustration that it often creates in our lives. The writer of the book will use the term frequently, meaningless. Meaningless. He says, life is meaningless. I've been on this search. I've been trying to figure out life. And I just keep coming back to the fact that life is meaningless. It's a tough word to translate, so let me do a little bit of Hebrew work with you guys just to help understand what this word that shows up so many times in the book of Ecclesiastes means. Because it's used more in this book than any other book in the Bible. In its most literal form, the word has to do with vapor. Like your breath, like the way when you breathe out on a cold day and you can see that vapor that's there for just a little while and then it just disintegrates and it's gone. That's probably the most literal definition of this word that we often translate meaningless. The Hebrew word is hebel. It means vapor, and it's a different kind of breathing than like in Genesis where God breathed into Adam and Eve, his breath of life. That's the Hebrew word for wind, which is the Hebrew word ruach. Hebel is it's vapor. It's that exhale. It's that fragile exhale. And most Bibles only translate it vapor in a couple spots. Like in Proverbs chapter 21, verse 6, it says, "A fortune made by a lying tongue is a fleeting vapor and a deadly snare." But again, Ecclesiastes uses it a lot, so it's important to get this word and understand this word. First time it shows up in the Bible, it's actually a proper noun. It's a name. A form of this same word shows up in the name Abel. Abel. What was Abel's legacy? Abel's legacy was that he was murdered by his brother, Cain. His life was Hebel. It was meaningless. It was left a sense of dissatisfaction. There was all this potential. There was all this opportunity. There was all this hope, right? This was after the fall and the brokenness that sin had created, Adam and Eve. And now you have children and God's promise, and there's going to be hope. And then, one brother kills the other. Abel, Hebel. There's this emptiness that comes with it. In Deuteronomy and in 1 Kings and in 2 Kings, there's a lot of talk about idols, and specifically false idols, and the word Hebel is used to describe the idols. And Hebel is used because the idols are ineffective. They're without substance. There's nothing to them. These idols are Hebel. The book of Proverbs, it says about the woman that is the virtuous woman. It says, "Charm is deceptive, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." When it says beauty is fleeting, that word for fleeting is Hebel. This is the word that shows up over and over and over again in Ecclesiastes, that life is Hebel. It's like dissatisfying. It's like a vapor. It's here, even the things that are good, and then they disappear. Everything is fleeting. Everything is absurd or disappointing. Nothing significant can be grasped. I don't know if you figured this out, but we don't like that as an answer to life. Like we just aren't satisfied with accepting the fact that life is meaningless. Part of our wiring, part of our DNA is that we just won't take that answer. And so we're going to pursue and we're going to search and we're going to try to find where that meaning is. And we're going to look for it in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different places. And the middle of the book of Ecclesiastes, I mean, really after chapter 1 and you got the final chapter, everything in the middle is about this journey and these pursuits that the writer goes on to try to figure out the answer to the question of what is the meaning and purpose of life. I mean, everything from pursuing wisdom or understanding time or throwing yourself into work or what we're going to look at today in chapter 2, the pursuit, the just full-blown pursuit of pleasure. This is somewhere where we go very readily. All of us do. When we're trying to understand life, we are often convinced that life is about pleasure and pursuing that which makes us happy, that which makes us feel good. And so it makes sense that as this writer would throw himself into life's journey for meaning and purpose, that as someone with as much resource and capital and connection and power and influence as he had. Many believe this to be King Solomon writing. Others have said it may not be him, but it's clearly someone with the same type of wealth, leadership, influence, and sway, because he could literally do whatever he wanted and pursue anything that he wanted. And what you're going to find is that as he threw himself at these pleasures, what he found was not satisfaction, but actually dissatisfaction. Have you ever been convinced that if you could just have all the money, all the power, all the fame, all the riches, all the influence, and all the relationships that you ever wanted, that life would just fall into place and that everything that you were searching for would just be gone and you would have it and you'd be satisfied? Well, this guy actually got a chance to live that out and to see how this would go. So lean in as we read about this pursuit. Chapter 2, verse 1, he says, I said to myself, I'll test you with pleasure to find out what's good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. What does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. And I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees, and I bought male and female slaves, had other slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of the kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, with the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all of this, my wisdom stayed with me. We're going to keep going here because verse 10 just kind of clarifies everything you need to know about how far this pursuit to find meaning through pleasure was chased. He says, I denied myself nothing that my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Now, I got to be honest, on the one hand, reading that verse, that's kind of a depressor. It's kind of a depressing book. Ecclesiastes has this tone to it that makes you go, man, I thought that might lend itself to a little more fulfillment, to a little more happiness. And it even raises the question for me, and maybe helps answer the question a little bit for me, like, why is this book even in the Bible? Like, why is such a discouraging, depressing book about a guy trying everything in life in the Bible and coming up wanting? Well, I think the reason is twofold. The first one is the book of Ecclesiastes is in the Bible as wisdom literature to keep you and I from train wrecking our lives. It's telling us, like, here are the steps not to take. Right? And we've all learned a lot of things in life by making mistakes. Pain is a teacher, and then we go, okay, I'm not going to do that again. But you've all had experiences where you saw someone else make the mistake, and you heard their story of pain or witnessed it up close, and you went, whoa, I don't have to choose this for myself. I see that pursuit is broken. I ain't doing that. That's one of the reasons why this is in the Bible. I think the other reason, and this is something that Danny got into a little bit last week, is that this book was written before Jesus came. And there's a sense of which life just doesn't make sense without him. That's part of what he came to do, was to be that fulfillment and to be that rest and to be that satisfaction and to be that place where our hearts could finally find what we've been looking for. And so it makes sense that without him into the story yet, that hasn't come. And that someone is searching and searching and searching for something to fulfill them, but they can't. Let me go back to that first purpose of the book, being that this book is in the Bible to keep you and I from train wrecking our lives. There are a couple bona fide, guaranteed, 100% ways to wreck your life that were just described in the verses that we read. Here's the first one. If you want to wreck your life, make temporary happiness your number one goal. 100% guaranteed all the time. If you make your happiness your understanding and your pursuit of happiness, your number one goal, you will train wreck your life. This writer of this passage says, that's what happened to me. And he says, I pursued these roads and these things that we all tend to think will make us happy further and deeper and with more resource than any of you in this room could ever explore. Because I was a king, because I was rich, because I had power, nothing could stop me. He says, I denied my heart no pleasure. I rode this ride all the way to the end. What does he describe? He describes a spiral in his life that ends with pain and regret and frustration. Because this spiral isn't just like a cycle that's going around and around and around. It's a spiral that's going down and eventually crashing. He made temporary happiness his number one goal in life. And it ended up breaking him. It ended up breaking him. And I know that like part of like the way he describes the things he pursued, you go, especially people in this room, I think you would go, well, duh. I mean, you just described that you had endless amounts of women in your life. And you chased women to the fullest degree that a man could possibly chase them. You had not just multiple relationships, you had a harem of women. Everybody in this room could go, yeah, I could see that that's probably not going to work out. Like pretty obviously that's going to train wreck at some point. Some point that's going to be a problem. But he says it's not just those things. It was the full-blown regret that came from, I chased every desire in my heart. I made happiness, my version of happiness, my number one priority, and it gained me nothing. I found that in the end, making my happiness my number one goal is a vain pursuit because it does not satisfy. It ends up breaking. That's one of the things that's shared there in that story, is that if you want to wreck your life, follow that pattern and just live for your own happiness. Or if you can't find happiness, here's the next piece of it. Live to be stimulated rather than satisfied. Like if you can't find satisfaction, that deep sense of peace and just settledness of the soul, well, just keep living to be stimulated. And you can do that with women, or with wine, or with work. You can do that with, like this book is interesting because there were church leaders like Jerome who said, you know, the key to understanding the book of Ecclesiastes, early church leader, one of the most influential on this book. And he said, the key is the phrase under the sun, under the sun. Everything under the sun is meaningless. And so we've got to get our eyes above the sun. We've got to look to Jesus. We've got to look to God. The things of this earth grow strangely dim in the light of Jesus, right? And all that's great. That's great. That's true. But his application was a bit harsh. Because his application was kind of basically, so we all just need to become monks and live in monasteries and just detach from the world and just disengage. Well, I think that's a bit overkill as far as application. Luther came along and said, hang on, have you read this book? Because the writer of this book doesn't say every pursuit of everything I did was evil. I mean, you could hear that in the description. Some of this is like, I was farming, and I was planting gardens, and I was working my job, and I was doing things that in and of themselves are fairly noble. But what happened? He was looking in each of those places for it to fulfill something that it could never, ever fulfill. He's looking for satisfaction, but he says the truth is they're Hebel. There was nothing to them. There was no hope. There was no help. And he's saying even the good things, they were hard to get, they were impossible to keep, and they were gone before I could ever fully appreciate them. Life is frustrating. Its pursuits are maddening. The hope seems to be constantly, and the peace seems to be constantly out of reach. And what we find in Ecclesiastes is somebody who came to an especially painful but meaningful place in their life. They came to the place in their life where they realize, I'm done doing this. I'm done trusting what I think is going to satisfy me. I'm done chasing pleasure. I'm done chasing happiness. Like that is such a painful place to come to, because you don't come there usually without massive, massive regret. You've walked down roads, you've experienced what you thought was going to satisfy you, and rather than satisfaction, you found, in fact, real deep regret and pain. So that place is a place of great meaning, because that pain is such a great teacher. This is him basically saying, I'm not going to trust my heart anymore. You know, we tell our kids, this is a prevailing message in our culture, trust your heart. Trust your heart. Go with where your heart leads you. That might be the dumbest thing you could ever say to anybody, honestly. The Bible speaks directly about the heart in Proverbs. You know what it says about the heart? This is a direct quote. The heart is deceitful above all else. Yeah, trust your heart. Trust it. It'll lead you off the cliff at 100 miles an hour. And you'll find yourself at the bottom, broken and in pieces, going, that didn't work. And you'll convince yourself, my heart was just devoted to the wrong thing. And after healing up a bit, you'll go run 100 miles an hour off another one. And you'll find yourself broken because you're convinced it's just the wrong pursuit. That one wasn't it. It's this one. And that's what Solomon was doing. And he kept getting broken, and he kept finding pain, and he kept finding regret. And he got to a place where he was done. He was done. Maybe it's hard for you to connect because you go, well, I don't have a harem of women. I don't have this kind of money. I'm not able to I just can't do. I'm not chasing stimulus, and I'm not on that level. Well, hold on a second though. Do we not try to do that, but in different ways? Whether we try to find something in a relationship that we're convinced is going to fulfill us, whether it's just some secret addiction, maybe it's a pornography addiction that's been justified. Well, I'm exhausted, I'm worn out, I deserve it. Life is tough, only to find that it's never ever going to satisfy. Maybe it's the way you drink yourself to sleep at the end of a day, just because the day's been tough. You're just convinced every time, this is going to make me happy. This is going to make me fulfilled. Maybe it's not even any of those. Maybe it's work and the way you pour yourself into trying to find meaning and purpose at work. Or it's through relationships, how you can manage people or maybe manipulate people. It's going to give you fulfillment. It's going to give you power. It's going to give you what you're looking for. Ultimately, all of these pursuits leave us in a place of brokenness. And honestly, guys, it's not just us. It's all the people around us. See, because when one person is broken, they don't just affect them. There's a spillover when people are pursuing pleasure and living to be stimulated rather than deeply satisfied in life. They hurt a lot of people on the journey that they're on to do it. But when you've crashed hard enough, when the pain becomes great enough of all of these pursuits that won't satisfy, there's this place that you get to where you say, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done trusting my heart. I'm done trying to find pleasure in the world. There's got to be something else out there. And that's the key point on this whole conversation, because it's only when you're done with everything that deceives you is that you're truly ready to find what will actually satisfy you. That's the only way you can do it. You can't add like Jesus into life, like a salad dressing that you can add on to whatever else you got going there. A lot of people approach faith like that. Like he's all just part of the equation. And I want to have this career that I find purpose and meaning in, and my family that I find purpose and meaning in, and my house and my car and my pleasures and my little things that I do, my vices. All these things are part of who I am. And Jesus, I want him in there too. It's not how it works. And anytime you have Jesus on the side like that, it'll leave you in a place where you might convince yourself that faith in Jesus has left you wanting. It's not that Jesus has left you wanting. It's that you weren't ready to actually let go everything that's deceiving and pursue him wholeheartedly. Because when he is pursued with no hands holding on to anything else, you find that satisfaction that your heart's been seeking. You don't find it in any other place. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, and it illustrates this so well, is in John chapter 4. Story of this woman who's a Samaritan woman. Samaritan and Jews had very nasty racial tension between them. And the Jews considered Samaritans to be half-breeds, and it was ugly. Jews did everything they could do to not associate with Samaritans. Jesus one day goes through Samaria. The Bible says he had to go through Samaria. Most Jews, when making the same trip, would actually walk a longer route just to go around it. But Jesus had to go through Samaria because he had to have a conversation with somebody, this lady. It's a great picture of the search for purpose. Many religions in our world will say you got to find it, you got to search for it on your own. One of the things I love about Jesus and Christianity is that he comes searching for us. He engages in a conversation with this woman, and she's shocked that he would have conversation with her. For one, because he's a Jew, she's a Samaritan. But as they get deeper into conversation, she's shocked because he's Israel's great teacher, and she's got a pretty checkered story. She's been married 5 times. She's living with a guy right now. She's not married. She was there at the well at the middle of the day because she didn't want the judgment and the scorn of all the other people in the community. No one else would come at that time of day. She's trying to get in, get out, and not be judged. She would expect it from Jesus, but what he gives her is this interesting dialogue where he asks her for a drink. She says, "How can you ask me for a drink?" He says, "If you knew who was asking you for a drink, you'd ask him for a drink, only it would be a drink of living water." She's like, "Well, what are you talking about? Where's this living water?" And then this is what he says in John 4:13. He says, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again." He's talking about the well that they're standing before. "But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." He's talking about the fact that he has something in himself and in a relationship with him that defies and goes beyond any other pursuit in life. You see, it's not just the kings who chase and try to find meaning and purpose with their wealth and resources and power. It's everybody who's ever walked the face of the earth. We try to find purpose and meaning. This woman had tried to find it. In every pursuit that she had looked for, she had found herself broken. She finds herself face to face with Jesus, and she's stunned that he even has conversation with her. She's a little mortified probably of her state, but she finds not condemnation, but love, grace, and very direct truth. They begin to have a dialogue about the Messiah, who's the one to come, the one that's going to save them, the one that's going to rescue them. And eventually, after a little more back and forth, Jesus just stops all the conversation and just says, "Lady, it's me. It's me. I'm who you've been looking for. I'm what you've been searching for. I am everything you desire." And she has this transformation that happens. She goes running back into town to tell the whole town about this man who just changed her life, who convinced her to lay everything else that she's ever pursued in life down and run wholeheartedly for. She says, "I found living water. I found that which truly satisfies. I'm not living anymore for what will stimulate for just a little while and then leave me wanting. I found that which gives my soul rest. She grasped what Jesus was saying. She came to an awareness of her real need. And honestly, the moment is just absolutely incredibly fascinating. She comes to Jesus with just a bucket, hoping to get a bucket of water. She leaves with an everlasting spring. She comes as a reject. She leaves being accepted by God Himself. She came wounded. She goes back whole. She came full of questions, and He sent her back as a source for answers, not just with answers, as a source for answers for everybody else. She came living a life of quiet desperation, and she left full of hope. Why? How? Because she let go of all the other pursuits of her life that had failed her over and over and over again to bring her meaning and purpose. She fixed her eyes on Jesus, and she allowed Him to be established as her primary reality. Listen, as we come to this moment of response, that's really, in a nutshell, what I'm calling everyone to do today. To find your peace and your satisfaction and to pursue with your whole heart, not your career, not having the best house or car, not pleasure seeking. In fact, the opposite of that. Most of you in this room have tried that, and you know it. It doesn't satisfy. Some of you have scars to show. It doesn't satisfy. And sometimes those mistakes give us the impression that it's too far, too gone, too late to ever have hope. No, it's not. This woman is proof. But you just have to let go of all of the other pursuits and just focus on Jesus. Just focus on Him. He's got enough grace for you, and I promised you He has enough purpose for you. But you got to turn away from this kind of double-minded, half-hearted life where you're trying to bring Him maybe even just partially into the picture. Let go of everything else that deceives, because it's only then that you're ready to fully receive what God has for you. If you've never done this before, if you don't even know what that means, how to say yes to Jesus and no to the world, in just a moment, we're going to sing a song together. I'll be standing at the back at the Connect Corner area. I'd love, just come on back there as we sing. I'd love to pray with you and talk with you, help you take that next step into a relationship with Jesus. Maybe for you, maybe you've already taken that step, but today is a reminder that the gospel needs to be repreached to our hearts over and over and over again. That it's not, I get Jesus in my life and then I add all these other things and then my life will be complete. Those other things and the pursuit, specifically where our heart is convinced that those are going to bring us fulfillment, the pleasure and the pursuit of that, which just we crave all the time, is going to make us happy. It won't. In fact, it'll leave you broken and it'll leave the people around you broken. Pursue Jesus. Pursue His approval. Live for His purposes above all things, and everything else in life will begin to fall into place. The best version of who you are is the version that Jesus has created you to be. There's a lot of good things that are in life. There's a lot of things that need to be stayed away from. All of these need to be seen in light of the greatness that is Jesus. And without Him as the number one, everything else gets out of whack and out of balance in life. So make it your pursuit to pursue Jesus with your life, and you will find what you have always been searching for. Will you stand with me? And will you join me in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father, God, we come to you today grateful for the lessons of Ecclesiastes. Grateful for the warnings, for the encouragements, for the hope that it holds out. God, may we stay away from that which leaves us broken, and may we run fully and totally to that which redeems, restores, renews, and gives us purpose. May we run to your Son, Jesus, and find our embrace in Him. There we will find who we are truly. There we will understand who you are truly. and that is where life's satisfaction begins and ends. May we find that today. And it's in your name